the things that you as an individual are meant to do in this life. And this is where most people have an issue with fulfillment. The second story is about what you do with your life, your work, your contribution, your assignments. If you grew up in divorce or chaos, you might be thinking to yourself, why can't I pick a path and stick with it? It's not because you're flaky. It's because you were trained by instability and chaos. Today, I want to talk to you about why calling feels so confusing when your first home was destroyed. We're going to get into what we call the second story of rebuilding your life. The second story is about what you do with your life, your work, your contribution, your assignments. It's not just about a job title, but your vocation is the work that you bring to the world. That's right. If you've been here before, you know that we have the Building a House framework, and that is our flagship understanding of how one's life should go. Now, I encourage you to go back and watch our wholeness framework video that explains the basic synopsis of each story of the house, right? But we have starting is your foundation, which is love and truth. Your basement, which is identity and integrity. The first story of the house, the first floor, is health, physical and financial health. Now the second story, or the second floor of the house, is vocation. And we add a parentheses S on that because you can have more than one. The things that you as an individual are meant to do in this life. And this is where most people have an issue with fulfillment. Obviously, we believe that we are able to fill the gap and provide evidence and need for all other areas of life. But this one is huge, especially in Western culture, because the majority of Western culture gets value from what you contribute. Now, obviously, we have a slight disagreement with how that is worded, because people who grew up in chaos, in divorce, in traumatizing situations as a child, we all have problems with self-worth. And so the reason why vocation comes on the second floor is because we believe that you can't know what it is you're meant to do until you have very specific prior categories satisfied. Because if we are designed, right, as we've said previously, we are a theistic company. We believe that God created the world. And if you believe that God created the world, then you believe that each and every single human being comes with a design as well. And of course, we've touched on this, right? As identity is so very important because who you are informs what you do. Now, the reason why I think so many people are aimless in this world is because they don't have a framework like we give. Now, there are plenty of successful people out there, but I personally don't see a lot of people who are specifically speaking to people like us. When you've grown up in extremely traumatic situations, oftentimes society forgets about people like us. And this is my vocation. I believe my life's work is in doing this, delivering this message and helping change the trajectory of people who have been forgotten. And so, the vocation for us is literally that. It is your life's purpose through what you can provide to the world. And we believe discovering that comes with a very specific subset of things, and the implementation of that is in three different ways. So that's what we're going to get into today. Obviously, I always share a bit of my personal story, and then we get into the psychology and the neuroscience, the spirituality is behind those things as to why we think they're important. And so we'll go ahead and get started with that. For years of my life, I struggled so much with this question. You know, the two most important questions I think any one human being can answer are, who am I and why am I here? And I think if you can't answer those two questions, life becomes very hard to want to continue living. It becomes very difficult. And I know that to be true because for years and years and years of my life, I desperately tried to answer those two questions, but I went about it in the complete wrong way. And I never want anyone to have to get to the point to where I was. If you've been here before, you know that I made a suicide attempt on my life, and obviously I survived. But I didn't have the answer to either of those two questions. In fact, part of what drove me to the suicide was because what I thought defined me didn't. Because that thing that I thought defined me evaporated in front of my face. And it was something that it wasn't fictitious in that I shouldn't have been doing it. What was fictitious was that I tied it to the worth of my life. It was a titled position. And I thought, if I'm not doing this, what am I doing? What is my life for? You know, why am I here? And when I had to give it up, because of the circumstances of my life at the time, I had to give it up. It was very hard to do. And it was probably one of the most painful things that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And the amazing revelation, though, was that when I survived my suicide attempt, I immediately knew, because I had been struggling for years with my idea of God as well. Like, who is he? Does he even exist? You know, is the God of the Bible, you know, a hoax? Because my interactions with God up until that point, I can't say they were null and void or moot, but my ideas about who he is and how he presents himself, I think, were very wrong in certain areas. Excuse me. And when I survived, I immediately knew that he loved me, because if I was still alive, because I shouldn't have been alive, the calculations for my survival at suicide were, I think, 0.003% or 0.03%. I don't remember. I'll have to go back, because I ended up running the calculations of my exact suicide attempt to see what the odds were. And so basically, though, it said it was a one-off. It was a miraculous event. It's an unrepeatable event. And so yeah, I knew if I was still alive, then I was meant to live. And intuitively, I knew that if I was meant to live, then my life had purpose. And if my life had purpose, then I am loved. And because your life cannot have purpose without love in it. There is no such thing as a cold-hearted, purpose-driven individual. Every successful person that you see in the world, and obviously it depends on how you measure success, right? But I would say at least probably 95% of your most revered and respected people worldwide don't do that emotionless. And they may make moves strategically that are cold and calculated. But I think ultimately, yeah, the most successful people in this life are the ones that know that they are loved. And so I was able to start exploring those questions once I understood I was loved. That's why we say the vocation is the second story, because if you don't have a foundation of love and truth, and you don't know who you are, then you couldn't possibly know what to do. And so that is why we've tied all these things together in the way that we have. And I think this is probably, like I said, a question that either haunts or inspires everyone every single day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into how we define vocations and what that means. So number one, I believe you can have more than one vocation. Because the nature of the word, so the root Latin word for it is vocare, which means to call. And so it is that ultimate calling on your life. Because if you believe in the monotheistic God as I do, and even if you don't, what we propose is that even if you don't believe in the monotheistic God as I do, or as we do at BHI, then at least you understand the universal force of love. That is how I have come to understand my relationship with God. He is the universal force of love. And when you look at the characteristics of love, then you can understand that not only was everyone born for a reason, but they were born to bring their purpose to the world. And that is the most beautiful, unique proposition to want to live life. If you understood that you were born to change lives, to impact the world in the way that you can, then that is like very inspiring and very hopeful. But I didn't have that perspective for a very long time. I lived in despair for a very long time. And I'm going to get into the psychology of why that is. And I know that you understand, as a person who comes from a traumatic childhood, it is very hard to believe that you can accomplish something great. It is very hard. And as much work as I've put in, the past still haunts me sometimes. You know, sometimes I still think, well, maybe it won't work out the way I think. And it might not. But regardless, we're aiming for a goal. Because if you can become the greatest version of yourself, which would be the person that you were created to become, then you would be able to do the most amazing things. And that is what makes this mortal life so beautiful, is that when a human being reaches potential, as an automatic byproduct, they change other human beings' lives. And when other human beings' lives are changed, then the overall status of planet Earth becomes a very beautiful place. Now, there are those who are working towards the darkness, towards the negative, right? Spiritual terminology, evil forces, as it were. But I believe that we're not meant to worry about those people. That we spend too much time worrying about all of the things in life that are horrible, that it takes away from what we can do to make it good. And so I want to define vocation and vocations to you guys, and hopefully it helps. This is certainly what we believe 100%, because this is what has propelled us in an upward direction. It's what gets us excited. It's what makes me want to get up every single day now, understanding that I have all of these things working in my favor to change the world. And even if I can't change the whole world, I can change my world and whoever is meant to be in it, right? Even if I only manage to assist 50 people for the rest of my life, but their lives are completely changed and transformed, then hey, we did something, and we accomplished something that transcends time, which is to deliver love to a fallen world. So I have my notes here, and we're just going to get straight into it, right? And so we believe that vocation is discovered in 4 different ways. Since we like to use architectural terminology, there's the 4 beams of vocation. When you can identify these 4 things, it will certainly, I think, not only assist you in getting there, but it will help you figure out exactly what it is that you're supposed to do. Because this is what worked for us, and this is what has worked for many people. We know because, as Isaac Newton once said, he can see so far because he stands on the shoulders of giants. And so there are people that we know that have consensus with how we formulate vocation, and they are very successful. They're the mentors and the people that have watered our plants, as it were. And so I think it's just absolutely amazing that we have this insight in how we can do it. And so the first thing about vocation, your purpose in life, you must first know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you can't know what to do. And so I think too many people get caught up in trying to do the work, and they skip that step of who am I? Because as an automatic byproduct of knowing who you are, you would know what to do. You would understand your capacity and the heights that you are meant to reach for. And so knowing your identity is so very important. That's why, like I said earlier, the building a home framework is a framework for wholeness. We want to leave nothing missing and nothing broken. And so that's why the basement is identity and integrity. And when you're building from the ground up, it can propel you into this atmospheric position of living the best possible life and not just surviving anymore. Because if you came from divorce, chaos, or trauma as a child, you've been surviving for too long. And it is only when you have all of these things together that you can thrive and you can live a life that is definitely worth living. And so who you are, your identity, so very important. Why? Because your vocations are inseparable from who God made you to be. So very important. Okay? Because identity precedes assignment. So if you believe that you were born with a purpose, if you believe that you were designed, created, as it were, then who you are meant to be is already set in stone within the very fibers of your soul. It's just a matter of building that. It's, as they say, it's not the journey, but it's the person that you become along the way. Alex Hormozy says that, right? And so what we believe is you cannot build the second floor until the foundation, which is love and truth, and the basement, which is identity, integrity, are solid. And so this is where your identity exchange with God matters. Because if he doesn't define who you are, someone else will. And guess what? And they will be wrong. No one could possibly love you more than he does, nor have as much vested interest in your personal development as he does. And if you understand him in the way as the universal force of love, then obviously that statement makes a lot of sense to you. If you don't have that experience with God, as it were, then obviously I understand why it wouldn't make any sense. And we're not out in the business of converting anyone to believe how we believe. All we can deliver is our personal experience, and that is what we believe it is meant to be for with God as well. It is meant to be a personal, experiential relationship. That's why we're anti-religion, because religion is man trying to define God to you, as opposed to relationship is God defining himself for you, right? Or to you. Okay? Very important, the distinction, right? Because vocation, purpose, we believe, begins with the question, who does God say I am? And let me tell you, if you start exploring that question, you'll find the most amazing answers. Right? Number 2, we got this from Dan Martell, wonderful man. He's changing lives the world over. We've consumed a bunch of his content in the process of reading his book, and we believe that what he had to say in regards to calling is paramount, and it made 100% sense to me. And what he says is your calling in life is tied to the worst thing that has ever happened to you. For us, we include things. Because honestly, I believe probably the worst thing that ever happened to me was my parents' divorce, because that was the catalyst for all the other suffering in which I experienced. Or my suicide attempt, right? That's hand in hand. But my suicide attempt is most likely a byproduct of my parents' divorce, just several years later in the making, and then on top of that, all of my own personal life choices that I made because of my psychology and the neuroscience behind how I thought and moved in the world. But that's Dan Martell's principle. And so this is not about trauma becoming your identity, though. Very important. It's about trauma becoming your training. So the very things that almost killed you are the things that qualify you to serve others. That is your qualification. You have a resume of suffering. And so now what that means is that suffering wasn't for anything. It wasn't for nothing. It had purpose. And that purpose was to aid other human beings who could not make it to the other side of that same suffering like you have. Because in your story, right? For me, it's my parents' divorce at age 8. The internal free fall, the coping mechanisms, the lies, the suicide attempt. they didn't disqualify me, they forged me. And so that's what we teach, is that your pain becomes your platform when it is transformed, not worshipped. Okay? The third thing is your childhood dream. Now, you might say, what the heck do you mean by my childhood dream? And it's not the career you thought would impress people. It's the thing you loved before the world broke you. Because here's what I want to explain. From a neurology perspective, a child couldn't possibly fully articulate the meaning or purpose of their life. And so you observe the world and you assign it a job. So my childhood dream was to become a paleontologist. I became obsessed with dinosaurs, prehistoric life, prehistoric marine life as well. I wanted to become a paleontologist, right? Because of the characteristics of a paleontologist. A person that searches lost history, that digs up bones, that digs up skeletons, that reveals things about the world that were once lost and yet precious. And then they publish their work after discovery. They take their hard-earned research and they publish it to the world to make the world a better place. Now, that might seem grandiose to you in my view of a paleontologist, but if you ask every paleontologist why they're doing what they do, they're going to say two things. Number one, they love discovery. And number two, I bet you, is they want to help people. Because the more we understand about science and the more we understand about the past, the better that we can become today. And it is understanding the world in that way, right? That old adage, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from. Obviously, though, a 6-year-old is not able to articulate it in the same manner in which I have just done. And so, you just are able to say, I want to be a paleontologist. That's the one, right? They ask you in kindergarten, what do you want to be when you grow up? People say firefighters, they say police officers, they say astronauts, they say a whole plethora of different things, right? Now, do they end up becoming those things? Some people do. But most of the time, people don't. They expand, they grow, and they realize, oh, it wasn't that job per se. It is the characteristics of that job, to be brave, to be courageous, to be this, to be that, right? And so it's not the career that you thought would impress people, but like I said, the thing you loved before the world broke you, right? And so for me, like I said, that was paleontology, digging, uncovering, revealing what lies beneath. And so what happened was that God redeemed that in my true identity, who I am meant to be, who I am. And that is an excavator of hearts. And I've explained that in the identity and integrity video, right, in the basement. And so for you, it will be something different, but it's always the same pattern. That unbroken childhood dream reveals your unbroken design. Okay? Very important. And number 4, your calling in life, or your vocation, is always going to be in service to others. Because without it, it's meaningless. If it's just for you, it's meaningless. It's vapid. Right? But vocation is never self-serving. It is identity expressed in love. So your calling serves people. Always. Because that's what brings the most fulfillment. Co-regulation. Right? Cohabitation. Human beings, we're socially designed creatures. Very important to understand. And so when you are serving others, right, then you truly will be fulfilled. That pit that you have where you're just like, you have no idea why you're here. Those are the 4 pillars of discovery. Okay? Who God says you are, the worst things that have ever happened to you, your childhood dream, and service to others. Now, what are the 3 manifestations of vocation at that point? Because like I said, I think you can have more than one vocation. And here's why that's important. Because, like I said, what ended up driving me to suicide is because I thought that my identity was in what I do. But that's not true. You do what you do because of who you are. It's the inverse. You don't, because what happens is if you receive your identity from the thing that you do, and that thing disappears, or you no longer have access to it, or you can't do it in the same capacity in which you've done it previously, well then guess what? You've lost your identity. Right? And so we cannot gain who we are from the things that we do. But the things that we do are shaped by who we are. And so we believe that vocation manifests itself in 3 ways. Number 1, what you do for others and get paid for. Right? Because you have to be able to pay the bills. You have to be able to, part of living a good life is not living paycheck to paycheck. Right? And so it would make sense that the thing that you were meant to do for your whole life would be able to provide enough value to others that you get compensated for it. And it's not usury and it's not selfish, right? But this is the economic expression of your calling. It includes your career, your business, your products, your content, your leadership. And this is what makes it righteous income. Right? This is what makes it useful. Right? Because it's money earned by serving people through who you are. The cleanest way to have a transaction. No better way to do it than that. The number 2, I think it is what you do for others for free. Right? This is the relational expression of your calling. The things that you would do even if no one paid you. Right? Which is encouraging others, counseling a friend, mentoring someone quietly without any recognition required, sharing wisdom, right? Or listening deeply. This is where calling becomes character, right? And how do I know? Because traumatized people, we love everyone because we would never want everyone to experience what we have experienced. That's why we go above and beyond on relational expression of our vocation, I think. But what happens is we lack in the economic expression because there is the shadow side of it as well, and I'll get into that. Right? And then number 3, right? What I think is what you do for God for free, between you and Him. And this is the spiritual expression of calling. The offering no one sees but Him. Prayer, service, integrity, worship, obedience, sacrifice, study. All of those things that are wrapped up in what's called your relationship with God. Whatever those are, right? And I use, biblical and religious terminology because that's what's commonly expressed and something that we can all understand. Right? And so oftentimes, though, these things don't pay in dollars. But what they do is they pay in identity. Right? And so when all 3 of these are aligned, I think, a person reaches vocational wholeness. Because again, that's the whole point of building a home incorporated, is to have a whole life, right? Not a perfect life, but whole. That means nothing missing, nothing broken. Pretty simple, right? So what you do for others to get paid, that's what allows you to have the most amazing life. That's what allows you to buy the house, to get the car, to travel, to eat your food, to buy your clothes, to take care of all of your living expenses, and then some. Than what you do for others for free. Right? Because oftentimes, sometimes I feel that those things I do for other people for free, that no one sees, that all I know is that I walked away and that person walked away better because of their interaction with me, that's one of the most amazing feelings in the world. Right? And then what I do for God for free. That relationship I have between Him and I. And so then, if that's my vocations, if that's my purpose on a daily basis, everything is covered. There is no minus on the spreadsheet. Right? It's whole. And so the problem is this: oftentimes, for children of divorce, which is our primary avatar, right? But also we speak to anyone who grew up in chaos, anyone who grew up in abuse and trauma, because you all understand these things, right? Divorce is just our pill, right? But then within that, what did I end up having? I ended up having a sociopathic, narcissistic, absentee, abusive biological father. And then I had a broken-hearted mother. And then I had horrible relationships with friends. And then I had substance abuse. And then I had lack of funds. And then I had lack of purpose. And then, all of that compounded into an eventual suicide attempt. Right? That's just my progression. But anyone who comes from trauma understands what we're talking about. But specifically, adults who grew up in a collapsed first home often, number one, feel unworthy of meaningful work. You believe, I'm not enough to do this. And the root in that is shame. And I want you to know something right now. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. We can make bad choices and feel guilty. That's something else, right? Guilt is when you feel bad for knowing you did something wrong. Shame is when you believe you're wrong. Your very existence is an infraction on humanity. And I'm telling you right now, that is the greatest lie that has ever been told. You have worth. Not only can you do something meaningful with your life, you should do something meaningful with your life. Because a person who's been traumatized, have more empathy for other human beings than any lay person could possibly understand. And I know that to be true, because that's how I feel every day. Or there's grandiosity, which is, I'm meant to do everything. And here's the thing, we can't do everything. It's just not possible. But there is one thing that you can do. Be you. And when you are yourself, and you work and explore and discover and journey through your purpose here on earth, you can change the world. But you can't do everything. And the reason why we're scared of that is because we have a fear of being invisible. That's the root. The root is fear of invisibility. But don't let that affect what you can do. Because what happens when you try to do everything, you get overwhelmed. And when you get overwhelmed, you end up doing nothing. But you're meant to do so much. And you can be so much more. It's who you are already. It's just a matter of building that person. Then number 3, avoidance. I'll start later. I'll start tomorrow. No. I'll start next week. I'll start in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 months, 5 years, 10 years. Right? And what is that root? The fear of failure. We avoid things because we're afraid to fail. But here's the thing. You have nothing to lose. And if you don't start, then you're guaranteed to fail. You may fail if you start. But here's the thing. You only ever fail if you quit. Because if you fail and get back up again and keep going, then you learned. Failure is one of the greatest tools on planet Earth. I failed all the way until 27 years old. And it helped me become the person that I am right now, that I'm able to speak to a camera and try to change the world the best way I can. And I will keep failing. But I will also keep learning. Because I'm going to get back up. Because now that I know who I am, I know what I'm meant to do. I have purpose. And I have that fire in my bones that can't be quenched. Right? And I just want you to know that these are not flaws. They're your body trying to protect you. Survival responses are intelligent. It was your brain's way of keeping you alive because as a child, you carried burdens that you were never meant to bear. So don't feel bad for yourself. In fact, feel great that your brain kept you alive in survival mode up until now. But that's not something that can be sustained long term. Survival only lasts for a short while before it starts to kill you. Because the human soul was designed for life. Life everlasting. Which starts here. On this side. Oh, I'll tell you what vocation feels like. It will have 3 emotional markers for you. Number 1, the effort feels meaningful, not draining. So yes, it costs you, but it feeds you. When I get home after a long day of work, I definitely don't want to record. I definitely don't want to keep writing in my book and for my book or my transcripts or studying psychology, studying neuroscience, studying spirituality, studying business. But when I do, it feeds me. I get excited because I'm like, yes, this is it. Number 2, your difficulty feels purposeful, not pointless. Because pursuing your purpose in life will have some difficulty to it. But what's also difficult is living a lie. And so you either choose to confront that difficulty for good or for bad. And let me tell you, you can only do the bad for so long before you want to die. So give yourself a chance to pursue your purpose, which is difficult, but for the good this time. Because that resistance is what trains you. That wall you hit while you're on your way to doing what you're meant to do, you'll learn how to either smash through it, to vault over it, to go through the side, or to create some sort of flying apparatus to where you can avoid the wall altogether, right? Because necessity breeds ingenuity. And number 3, people confirm the fruit, not the fantasy. So your calling will always be validated by impact. Even if it's only validated by one. Because if it's validated by one, then you know it has the potential to be validated by many. When we first started posting YouTube videos, we had our first comment. And the person said, "I'm so thankful to God that you posted this video because it was everything I needed to hear." And so your impact will validate you. And don't worry about the numbers, because consistency over time compounds into success. And growth is exponential, just like in the stock market. That annual compounding interest, the same thing works with your calling in life. When you continuously pursue it over and over and over again, it will start to compound for you. And it's the most amazing thing, trust me. I'm so excited for you guys to get started. So here's your assignment tonight. Ask these 4 questions and listen with honesty, not fear. Who am I? What am I built for? What breaks my heart? And who gets stronger when I show up? If you answer those truthfully, you won't just find your calling. You'll finally understand why God wrote your story the way He did. This is the second story. This is where purpose lives, brick by brick. Thomas Emmanuel Arms O'Brien. I love you guys.